Air leakage. This is out of the CHBA manual, and we had a limited supply of these manuals in our booth, and some of you have picked them up. This is a study that was done by the Housing Institute in Ottawa. It was funded by CHBA, and this is a typical winter in Ottawa, and this shows the moisture getting into the wall through air leakage versus vapor diffusion. Through vapor diffusion, only 1/3 of a liter of water got into that wall. That means that wall will dry out. Right? Take a look. Through a 2-centimeter hole, 2 by 2 centimeter hole, that represents the air leakage of a house, and that's conservative. 30 liters of water got into that wall system. There's no hope in hell of that wall drying out, ever. Right? So you're going to get dry rot setting in, you're going to get mold concerns, you're going to get all kinds of stuff happening with that wall system. That's why the emphasis is on super tight, super insulated, right? And you got to get that into your programs. I'm going to share with you a high-performance wall system. I'm not here to sell product. I'm here to sell a solution. So whether you use this or any other sheathing that is an air barrier material, you got to learn how to use it. You got to learn how to seal it so it acts as your air barrier, because that's the way they're going. The advantage of this is that you're not using a whole lot of material to do this, and there's not a horrendous cost to this either, because you're sealing exterior insulated sheathings with either gaskets or tape or a combination of both, and it's the combination of both that that's becoming popular. Here's also, I want to mention to you the houses that we did with this system. If you take a look at all of them, all the builders gave us step foundations. They are the hardest home to seal, the air seal. That's what gives builders trouble in sealing homes, is the step foundations, right? So when we did the tests, here's where we came in. We did a blower door test. First of all, I'll walk you through how, I'll go through this very quickly. But you apply gaskets to the top and bottom, to the top plate, bottom plate, around windows and doors, and every 4 feet, right? We have since developed a hybrid system, which is just gasketing at the uppermost bottom plate, and if it's a 2-story, at the uppermost top plate, and around windows and doors, and that's it. And then you tape everything else, right, from the outside. And we do the blower door test at the framing stage, just to show the building officials and the builders how effective this system is. What makes it effective is the compression of that sill gasket, right? When it gets nailed in, that compresses, right? And that's what gives it the air seal. And here's what the way it goes. Some use that exterior insulated sheathing and they rest it on their headers or the rim joist, okay? So what they do is that header wrap is caulked to the foundation wall. So the continuous air barrier is concrete, because concrete's an air barrier, to the header wrap, to our tape, to the foam, and then up. That's the continuation of the air barrier system. That's the continuity of the air barrier system. So the others do it this way, where they do that, and then they tape the seams, right? Just as I was discussing earlier, right? The other way is to bring the foam all the way down over the header. We have since made a 10-foot board because we were being asked for it, so that you can get away from piecing it together on the header. So the 10-foot board goes all the way down over top of the header, right? So you don't have to worry about gasketing, you don't have to worry about taping, okay? But there's 2 ways of doing that. When we did the taping, this tape we had to develop because we couldn't get any assurances from anybody that the existing tapes would work for the life of the home. So we needed to develop a tape that sticks like hell, basically. And I'll tell you, you try pulling this thing off of foam, you'll take a layer of foam with it, right? That's how effective it is. Plus, it has a lot of elasticity to it as well. So when the project settles, or when a new built home settles, that tape moves with it, right? And it'll maintain its air barrier properties. Building officials just love it when it comes to that, right? We've also looking for, and this is in front of CCMC right now for you for an evaluation number, but we've also got a tape that's going to be used as a flashing tape as well. So no more priming, none of that stuff. All you do is just put it on, tape it to the foam, and around windows, for example, you just tape right over top of the rough window opening, and you've got it sealed. So that we're expecting, when are we looking at that? Probably first quarter of next year sometime, right? So we'll have the CMHC listing for that as well, right? The poly still remains as the air barrier on the ceiling. We have builders now who are looking at putting a 1-inch of foam on the ceiling and sealing that and using that as their vapor barrier and then drywalling that over top, only because the R5 reduces the thickness of the insulation that has to be blown into the attic. So there's going to be all kinds of things that builders and renovating contractors are going to be doing to try and come up with these numbers. That's why you need the building science behind it, so you can understand what can be done and what can't be done, okay? What's common right now is the use of sprayed foams in rooms over garages. This is not a complimentary picture for sprayed foam. But I'll tell you, it's not the product that's at fault. It's the people, or it's the person that installed this. Sprayed foam is manufactured right at the end of the tip of the gun. So if you've got a guy who's been trained well and knows what he's doing, these jobs come out looking very, very well, right? If you've got somebody on the gun who's had a rough night for one reason or another, and they're doing this, this is what you wind up with. Guarantee there's going to be comfort complaints that the floor is going to be cold, right? Because you haven't sealed any of the joint. Look at this. I mean, the heat's just going to transfer right through there, or the cold is just going to work its way up, right? Gaps like this, when I took a look at that, standing underneath and looked up, I could see the bottom, or I could see the underside of the bedroom floor, right? It's not the problem of the foam. It's the problem of the guy installing it, right? So you got to make sure if you're using sprayed foam, you got to make sure that the contractors, whoever subtrade you're using, their people have been trained and they've been certified to install this stuff. Okay. What we're also seeing is builders moving away from that and going back to bats and using the cold-board air barrier system, but just inverting it and using it up on the ceiling. And that's what's led to builders looking at using it inside as well. So they insulate with bats, the foam goes up, it's taped, right? And then away you go. Now, that tape you see in there is the tape we originally came out with, but we were told very quickly by the framers that they didn't like it because they had to handle it with kid gloves. So the tape that we've got out now is just absolutely fantastic, and everybody loves it, right? Basements. Remember that R20 plus an R8 continuous insulation? This is what they're talking about. Now, you can do this in renovation projects, and you can do this in new build. In a new build, you run the foam from the top of the foundation right down to the footings, and then 2 inches underneath the slab, right? What this foam is hydrophobic. Closed-cell foams are hydrophobic, and that's what you should be looking at as a closed-cell foam when you're using this. Closed-cell foams are hydrophobic, which means the moisture that's in the foundation isn't going to be working its way in. Well, it'll work its way inwards, but it'll hit the back of the foam and then run down the foam back into the stone where it'll drain away, right? There will be no moisture in the basement at all. That's where this R20 plus R8 continuous insulation came from, is to solve the moisture problems in basements, okay? So you got to make sure, you got to understand this thing. If it's an existing home, this is 2 inches underneath the slab, and then they pour concrete over that. If you're a renovator and you're putting in foam on a foundation wall, you have to make sure that you caulk the bottom of the foam, because that water isn't going to get through the foam. That liquid water is just going to hit the foam and it's going to want to run down, right? And if it's not sealed, it'll run underneath the foam and come out. If it's sealed, the water will find the least path of resistance. Concrete wicks water like a sponge. It's unfrigging real what concrete does. Great product to build with, but I tell you, it doesn't hold back any moisture at all, right? So it'll wick it up. So when you've got this on the inside of your foundation wall and there's moisture in it, it will work its way back up and then out, to the top of the foundation wall. That's how much it'll take the least path of resistance, right? And if you've got your foundation wall sealed, it's not getting in, so it's going to find another way out, okay? This, by the way, this home was one of the homes in the green tour that happened through OHBA, through the Guelph, Kitchener-Waterloo area. The builder got permission from the city, because when you're using foam, you got to drywall and you got to protect it. He had permission from the city to leave it exposed until after the tour, because he wanted to point out how comfortable that basement was. This is his standard construction now. It's eliminated all of his moisture complaints, right? They brought the people downstairs into the basement, and the builder asked the people, after he walked them through what he did, he asked them to remember what it feels like in this basement. And then when we tour, compare what it feels like in this basement to the other basements that you go down into, right? And what we heard coming back was that the other basements were cold and damp, okay? So this is a fantastic system, whether you use pink foam or whatever. It is a fantastic system that I think will become standard with this. All right, so this is what you don't have to do now. All right, if you move the air barrier to the outside, you don't have to mess around with these electrical outlets, right, to make sure that they're airtight. You don't have to do this kind of detailing anymore, right, because everything now is on the outside. The air barrier is on the outside of the wall. This poly now is just a vapor barrier, so all you have to do is just overlap it and clamp it, and that's it. And it gets clamped when the drywall goes on. Right, so you don't have to tape it. You don't have to do anything with this thing. Just overlap it, and that's it. It's a vapor barrier. Right? Back framing. I love showing this slide because this is terrific. The poly, somebody had the presence of mind to put the poly up before they back frame so that you could tie the vapor barrier into it. But what's missing in there? This is a heating duct going to the second floor. Yeah, there's no insulation. Somebody missed that. Now, do you think somebody's going to put insulation in there? This is going to become the coldest room in the winter and the hottest room in the summer because they missed that. Okay? But if you put your vapor barrier on the outside, it doesn't matter, or your air barrier on the outside, right? You don't have to worry about things like this anymore. All right? So we did some blower door tests. I'm going to share this with you very quickly. We did it with a large production builder, a medium size, a small one, and a custom builder. Just to give you the idea of what kind of air changes you can get with this. All the blower door tests were done at the framing stage, so no insulation, poly, or drywall on the wall yet. The only drywall was on the ceiling, because if you do this and you don't clamp that ceiling, that poly on the ceiling, it'll suck the poly right off. Do you know how a blower door test works? What it's creating? A blower door test is the equivalent of a 40-mile-an-hour wind blowing on each side of the house and down on the roof, all at the same time. That's what this blower door represents, right? So if it leaks, you're going to know, and you're going to know big time, right? When we did these blower door tests with this builder, we tested at the drywall stage, tested with a home that was done with cabs and tape, and then one with just tape. And here's where the results came in, right? Their standard practice came in at 3.1, which is about where the code is, right? With the gasketed approach, 1.5 air changes at the framing stage with no insulation, poly, or drywall, and then 2.3 with just tape only, right? And when you consider R2000 is at 1.5 at the pre-delivery stage and Energy Star as a 2.5 at the pre-delivery stage, exterior air barriers are coming in at 1.5 to 2.3, right, at the framing stage. So that means these homes came in at 1 or less. Right, which again suggests that you really got to know your stuff in terms of how to size furnaces and that type of thing. A mid-sized builder, and again, step foundation, and this one came in at 1.3 air changes at the framing stage. Look at the leakage area, 76.4 square inches. That's the size of an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. That's the total leakage area of this house at the framing stage. No insulation, poly, or drywall. That's how effective exterior air barriers are going to be. That's why the move is from inside to outside, right? And then when you're looking at a production or a small production builder, and again, a step foundation, this one came in at 1.23 air changes. Yeah, 1.23 air changes. And then a custom builder, trying to get this airtight, was going to be a nightmare, right? So it was interesting, this one, because when we tested at the framing stage, this is where it came in. 0.97 air changes per hour. So we were below 1 on this house. It's unbelievable. And then we did it at the pre-delivery stage, and this is where we came in at, 0.61. He missed passive housing by 0.01 air tightness, right? So that's exterior air barriers. That's where the market is going. That's why you're seeing renovators and builders are starting to look at sealing from the outside, because it's a whole lot easier. And the codes are going to be calling for this as well. Training is very, very important. Actually, let me go back to one stage. The HVAC right sizing. There is a new F280 standard that's out that will probably be in the code by 2015. The old standard isn't going to move. It'll be there. The new standard will mirror the old one, right? This will give you the ability to design the furnaces that will be the right size for the homes, right? So they'll take into account the thermal efficiency of the home, the air tightness of the home, the orientation of the home, which the old standard doesn't, right? And then you can plug in the air tightness, or your consultant can plug in the air tightness and come up with the right size furnace. Training for builders and trades, we're going to be going through a lot of this. Huge. So any training courses you can take, I tell you, Enter Quality, and I'm a little biased to Enter Quality because I sit on the board of Enter Quality. They are the delivery agent for Enercan, and they are a service provider, and they offer some fantastic, fantastic training sessions on building science, air tightness, and that type of thing. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be showing you one shortly. Right? So training is very, very important. We do this. We also did training at the building officials level so that everybody understands this system. This took on a life of its own. It was incredible. From this, we went to a formal training session that's generic, and it has our system as the case study because we're the only ones out there so far with the CMHC number on our total system. That's not going to stay like that for long. I know of 4 that are in front of CCMC right now waiting for CMHC listings. So this is the way of the future in terms of air barriers. But this became so popular at the building official level that we just couldn't be everywhere. So it went on their website. It is now on the Ontario Building Officials website, right? And it's an accredited course for building officials to take because building officials have to come up with so many credits every year on education. This is one of them. Right, so it's there. So building officials know how to do this. And we didn't stop there. We've got a training session for framing contractors too that'll do this. The installation manual on how to do all of this stuff, we didn't come up with this. We put together a steering committee of builders and building officials. So they're the ones that are responsible for the installation manual that we have. So everything that's in there, we are very, very confident that it's doable and it's very cost effective to do, right? Framing contractors, they are going to become the air barrier specialists. Right now it's the drywall contractors who install the poly, right? That's going to move to the framing contractors. So we've got a training program in place for framing contractors as well that covers this. The building officials said, well, how do we know these people have been trained? And we said, well, that's fine. When we do our training, we'll certify them and we'll give them certification cards. So if you're looking for a framer and you want him to do the exterior air barrier system, all you have to do is ask for the card, and he'll show it to you. You know that he's gone through our training session. So that's what we've done there as well. Okay? The federal government, Enercan, because of the air tightness, the superiority of air tightness on the outside of the home versus poly on the inside, Enercan took note of that. So and I mentioned this earlier, we're part of a 5-year or a 4-year net zero, affordable net zero home project with builders right across. And these are production builders that are going to be building in their standard surveys. We've had 2 of them step up to the plate right now and say that, you know, we're not just building the minimum of 5 homes that they're asking for. These subdivisions are going to go net zero. So we're going to be at net zero before long, before 2030. I'm convinced of that, the way the uptake is on this, right? Enercan opened the door, but it's the builders that are driving this. This is huge. The industry is driving this, right? And the Americans are sitting back there wondering, No offense, but the Americans are sitting back there wondering what's going on. You know, you can build an Energy Star home in the U.S. because I've heard from our counterparts because they're so impressed that Energy Star has become so successful in Canada and the air tightness of it. Energy Star protects the envelope of the home. There are trade-offs, but you can't trade off the envelope and put better mechanicals in. You can't do that. As a matter of fact, this system, if you're a custom builder and you're an Energy Star builder, this system will earn you 1 point off that 2.4 pick list that you have to pick from as well. Right? So that's how effective this is. You're at a level 4 air tightness with this on Energy Star. Right? But in the U.S., you can get an Energy Star home that leaks. That's like 5 air changes per hour. Right? So they're amazed that what we're doing with Energy Star in Canada. And it was all driven by the builders. The success of this is huge. So to sum up this part of it, the use of energy in the home, right? 55% is used for heating, right? 20% for hot water, 20% for lights, and 5% for cooling. So the question is, when you go in for a renovation, what do? What's the first thing you do? If somebody wants a new kitchen, you're just going to ignore that? Or are you going to start working it into your conversations on how you can help reduce their consumption by half if they do things right, okay? The anatomy of air leakage or the anatomy of heat loss, well, it's the same, heat loss, air leakage, right? Here's where the amount is. It's 30% of the home, so 30 to 40% is because of air leakage, right? And then the rest of it, walls are 20, windows are 20, basement's 25, and the attic is 5. You know, I question that attic of 5% because you put pot lights in there, and I'll tell you, they leak like a friggin' sieve. And these pot lights on the market that are supposed to be airtight, I have yet to talk to a builder who's installed them and hasn't had any problems, or a renovation contractor who's installed them and hasn't had any problems with air leakage. These things leak like a sieve, right? So, I mean, if you don't have to install them, don't. If you're installing them, make sure they're not breaking the ceiling. They're installed either in the rec room or on the first floor somewhere, because you start putting them through ceilings. They look nice, but I'll tell you, it's going to be a headache for people. So based on this, what would you do first? Right? What would you address first in this if you're talking to a potential client? Right? Well, first you talk about making the home tighter. Right? Secondly, better basements. So you'd ask, you know, what state the basement is in, right? Then we'll look at better windows, you'd look at better walls, right? That's the type of thing you need. We have renovating contractors, or a couple of renovation contractors, that actually have this in their presentation books, right? Just to sit down with the homeowners and say, here's where it is, and this is what you should be doing. Now, if you're in for a kitchen reno or a bathroom reno, right, and you point this out, they may not do it at that time. Well, when it comes time to do it, who are they going to think of? Right? That's the lasting impression you're going to get, right? Is you're going to get those calls back. Yeah. So you wouldn't put better windows in? Okay. 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 Now, let's get into acoustics. The homes are getting tighter. Your projects are going to get tighter, right? There's an opportunity of you to promote this, right? Because the noise in the home now is going to become, instead of outside noise, it's going to be the noise inside the house that's going to become prominent now. So there's an opportunity for acoustics. The thing you cannot talk to homeowners about is soundproofing. You tell a homeowner that you're going to soundproof a room, their expectation is going to be up here. The best you'll do is come here. And you'll have all kinds of trouble trying to explain the difference, right? So what you talk to homeowners about is reducing the noise by 50%. And what that means is this, that if you're in a room watching television and you want to hear what's going on in the next room, you have to turn that television off, you have to walk up to the wall, and you have to listen. That's what reducing the noise by 50% means, okay? So when you start doing that, you need to understand how all this works. STCs are how a system measures the sound or the resistance to sound, right? STC stands for sound transmission class, right? That's what they measure. The codes are calling for an STC of 50, right? What we're seeing now is STCs of 55 and 60 because noise in the home is starting to become a real major issue. Now, those 55s and 60s, they're like where you've got party walls. So if you get called in to do some reno in a townhouse or whatever, right? Understand that that party wall is going to be a major issue, right? So whatever you do, make them understand that it's not because of what you did that's going to cause them the issues, right? Because, you know, somebody else next door moves in, and then all of a sudden music is playing, and the bass and the low frequency sound and all that kind of stuff, right? And then they're going to start wondering, well, shit, maybe what XYZ contractor did is causing all this stuff, right? So you need to be able to explain this to people. In a typical home, probably an STC of 50 will do it, right? You won't get people complaining about noise from one room to the other. But when you do that, you need to understand how sound works. There's a sound, there's a source, in this case a radio, for example, and then that sound from that radio turns into sound waves and it hits a surface, a solid surface. That surface starts to vibrate. And when it starts vibrating, it works its way through solid connections, right? So wherever the drywall is fastened to the wood stud, that's a path for the sound to get through. Whatever works into the cavity, if there's no insulation in that cavity, it starts bouncing back and forth inside that cavity. It acts as a reverberation chamber and then finally works its way out. So how would you go about reducing the noise from one room to another if this is all happening? You know what you got to remember? Other than moving, right? You got to block the sound, you got to break its path, and you absorb what gets into the cavity. And in worst case scenarios, you have to isolate, okay? And here's what you do. By blocking it, you add additional layers of drywall, okay? So either one drywall or two layers or a single layer. My experiences in this industry, double layer one side, single layer the other side. Seems to work very, very well, okay? The other is to break the path of the sound, and that's using resilient channels, right? And these resilient channels cost next to nothing, but yet they're so effective at reducing sound from one room to another because that sound, when it passes through the drywall, hits that channel, instead of going directly through the stud and into the other room, it travels along that channel and it dissipates. So the only way it gets through is where the channel is attached, or where the resilient channel is attached to the stud.